So we just finished reading Rumors by Neil Simon. So Neil Simon claims that this is his first farce that he wrote. Just a fun fact, he actually wrote it as a catharsis for himself to get through something difficult. He was going through a pretty difficult time, and so he wanted to write something that was fun and funny. And he thought to himself, what better than a farce, because he'd never written one, and something that he wanted to do with not super wealthy, but well-to-do people. So just as we've gone through, what are your first thoughts and impressions from this play?
The play is extremely funny. I was crying the whole time. I don't know who's my favorite character from this play. I think for him to be going through something and for this to come out of it, I'm sure he was laughing writing this. I mean, it was too fun. I was crying. I was seriously crying. I gotta say, I love Cookie. I love the whole character of Cookie. Favorite character in me. But besides Lenny, saving
Cookie all the way. Cookie 100% is just the perfect contrast.
She's that person that just gives you all the information you don't need, or like you don't want to be with her in a scary movie because you're hoping like, you know what? I hope they kill her. I hope she dies. I hope they get her.
But she'd be the last one standing at the end.
She really would.
She would be.
The killer would just miss her, and she'd just go about her day.
Yeah.
She probably wouldn't even know the killer was around. What happened?
Yeah, on her hands and knees looking for her
42 people once.
Oh, do you want some lasagna?
Or in The Amazing Race, she would accidentally stumble across the finish line and be like, "Oh, I won!"
My God.
And then my back.
Yeah. That was amazing. Good writing. Good writing.
Shia, I saw your hand up.
What I really thought was interesting was the way he kind of like sprinkled in their wealth. Oh, you wore that dress for cerebral palsy in August. Oh, you wore that dress for leukemia in May. You know, like all these charity functions. And they spoke about it like it was like the Sunday paper. Like it was just like, oh, yeah, like, you know, I've heard about that. Sure, you were there. I saw it. Great dress. But I wasn't paying close enough attention to actually know what you were wearing. So I just thought it was really interesting that in his tough time, and he's like, I'm going to write a farce. I'm going to write something that's really satirical, and I'm going to make fun of the fact that people that are in high society and socialites, this is what we do. We go to charity events, and we wear different gowns and dresses for certain charity events. And it was just really interesting how he made it for, like, the women, at least, like, their interaction was very much of, oh, this gown for, you know, X disease on this X month. Interesting. Cool. Let's move on. Like, I thought that was really funny, honestly.
Awesome.
Amanda?
I also think it's funny because there's so many different ways you could play with that question. But like, oh, didn't you wear that already? You know, like, there's also that mode of like really high society of like you're never allowed to wear the same thing twice.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So there's that as well. I wrote down a line that I thought was really funny when Chris says, "Why didn't you tell me you told them? They must think I'm an idiot." Not about any of the stuff that's actually happened, not about this crazy thing. She's like, oh, now they think I'm stupid.
Right.
Such a saving face. And then the moment when two of the characters, Cookie picks up the present that's already broken, and then she thinks she breaks it. So they're like, oh, we'll buy you a new one. We'll replace it, obviously. And then, but they don't correct. We're like, oh, it was already broken. They're like, yes, if you must, thanks.
Right.
It's so funny where there's like even that underhanded part of the characters as well. For as much as they're like friends, there's also like purr at them.
Ginny and then Rob.
I just to bounce off the ladies, I think it's such a funny caricature of wealthy people in society. Even these relationships, the relationships between Cassie and Glenn. I'm like, what is this conversation? There's like just no communication between this couple whatsoever. But you can still tell there's still love in there. It's just this very it all really is a cartoon, and as the sheriff puts at the end, it's a very cartoony depiction of wealthy society. So do we know a little bit more background on the writer and what time period he was writing in also? Sorry, I missed some of that.
No, it's all good. Rob, we'll go to you, and then I'll do that for you, Ginny.
Yeah, no, I to go off of what Amanda was saying, and about saving face, like I think it's interesting that he was trying to like kind of explore, exploring humor through like the relationship that these rich people have with each other, which is like, everyone is so private about, I mean, obviously they're like, they talk a lot about themselves in a lot of ways, but also like not sure, they're sort of like lying all to each other, but they can't keep up with their lies because there's lies happening in between all of the smaller relationships within, their larger group. And I just thought that was like an interesting thing to explore with like wealthy people and how like phony their relationships can be sometimes. So.
Well, and how far they're willing to go to avoid a scandal.
Right.
And on Ginny's note, even Chris's one line of, I think Cookie or Cassie or someone says, "Do you even understand him in real life?" "Oh, we don't talk very much." That's like, also, I think that transcends many classes. You know what I mean? Like couples that don't really communicate effectively.
I saw Cam pop up and Shio, but real quick. So the writer's Neil Simon. He wrote such things as like The Odd Couple, Biloxi Blues, Brighton Beach Memoirs, and Rumors came out in 1988, I believe, was when it first premiered. So this is very late 80s, early 90s time frame. I think they talk about the BMW or the Porsche being a 1990 Porsche. So it kind of gives you the time frame of what's going on. But yeah, Cam, I saw your hand pop up, and then we'll go to Shia.
Yeah, I sort of have this thing where it feels very contemporary, almost in the way of like an episode of Real Housewives, just because of the way they interact, and it's so like it's society based, but it's the narcissism and the miscommunication. It really, I found that to be hysterically funny, and I've never watched a Housewives show before, but that's how I imagine them to be.
Well, the drama.
So this is sort of like I've got this whole thing in my head about just being like, oh yeah, this is what it's like. Obviously, this is the Kardashians on crack. Like it's just like it's all that sort of thing.
Well, and to that point, how funny is it that this is supposed to be a farce, but that's real?
It's closer to real life than we think. Yeah,
That's our real life television right there.
As somebody who is absolutely obsessed with Housewives, it's very close.
Oh, good.
It's very close.
Thank you for the verification.
But I mean, and that was kind of going to like what the point that I was going to make was just that it like here's someone who is you're all saying is your close friend, whether you're a lawyer, whether he's running for whatever, you're the wife of. You're all saying he's a close friend. He's attempted to commit suicide, and we're all worried about appearance. We're all concerned about what's the paper going to say? How is this going to impact the state Senate election? How is this going to impact, our relationships? And I feel like this is kind of a theme we've seen in a couple of plays that we've done. And I feel maybe because this is how we view people in high society, is that their concern is very much about public appearance, that public perception, that how are people viewing us? How are people going to see us? How is this going to impact our relationship? The gossips, the rumors, the country club, this, that. We're so concerned with who's saying what at the country club, at tennis, with who they're playing and who's voted in, and, you know, someone's ready. But our friend, in the meantime, is passed out in his bedroom, and he's got a bullet wound in his ear. His wife is nowhere to be found. There's no help. Everything's chaotic. However, the dress that you wore for cerebral palsy is absolutely stunning. And let's just make sure that when the cops arrive, we make a whole story to make sure that you know, attempted suicide is not talked about, and we save face. And it's really interesting, for me at least, that this story, this play, and I think the last couple plays that we've done, that we've discussed, that perception, public perception, is so important, especially in the wealthy class. And when we talk about the Real Housewives and, you know, the Kardashians and all that stuff, that's what all it is. You know, we're all on camera, we're looking perfect, we have this perception, everything's great, and we don't want, you know, Chloe's back with Tristan, who cheated on her 3 times, and, you know, Jordan Woods, and oh my God, but let's all face it, she's actually back with him and pregnant, but we're gonna cancel Kardashians. You know, like, it's all about this perception and how we're perceived, and that's what's more important to us as human beings. Is that what we're saying? Is that what the message is? That the perception is more important than what our reality and our actual relationships are? That's
I think those are good points. Andre, I saw your hand, and then Cam.
Why is it always a senator? Like, what's wrong with senators, man? Like, why are you always in a scandal? What are you guys doing? You're not running the country. Just along the lines of perception, like, that's, I hate to bring it to this, but like, that's what, like, you always hear even with politics today. It's like, but what about my ratings? What about, you know, how many people were at my convention? Oh, I got a haircut at a salon and I made everyone get out at a salon. It's like the perception. We always do this. Like, this is, even if you're not wealthy, you're constantly worried about your image. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest problems that we have, and I think it makes a lot of people depressed because you're worried about what someone else is going to say about you instead of just living your life. I really don't think it's just a rich people problem. I'm not rich, and I definitely think about, like, is this good enough? Do I look, you know, a certain way? Do I feel a certain way? Am I being a certain way? It's at every class level. It's at every race level. It's everywhere you go. It's in the news. It's on Instagram or any other social media platforms. Even with the Black Lives Matter movement, you have to worry about, like, is this a peaceful protest? You can't even be like, yes, it's peaceful. You know what I mean? Because you have to worry about, there were protesters that had to stop people from burglarizing stores or smashing up stores because you have to worry about the perception. We're not worried about what's going on. We're just worried about the perception and how things look. So it's not a rich people problem. It's just funnier when they're richer. It's funny at a reality show. It's funny. I look sometimes at or listen to what Shio is watching, and I'm just like, these are how old? These ladies are how much money?
Don't hate, okay? It's a good show.
How much money do we have? And we're still worrying about the problem is y'all have all these millions of dollars and you're still worrying about shit that I worry about? Like, I thought it got better. What happened? You know? So it's at every level.
Cam, and then Amanda. I saw y'all's hands pop up.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was interesting, sort of jumping on the back of what Shio was saying, and to the extent that it's actually very timely, that there was a lot of suicide awareness posts and things going on social media
Day,
and whatnot.
Suicide
And
Awareness
it's-
Day.
Suicide
Yeah.
Awareness Day.
yeah, this is a very timely discussion, and certainly something worth, highlighting perhaps on within the discussion about how like it's such a serious issue is within a play.
And it's
And then-
overlooked because of everyone's emotion.
Exactly.
Everyone's
Right.
appearance.
Right.
Exactly. And that like we're all incapable of engaging with someone that's actually potentially dealing with something very, very difficult. And what we do to avoid that or not, or to avoid a scandal, and what the things that we prioritize. And so it's perhaps a damning reflection on these people, but it's very real in its own way. And I give that to everybody to discuss further.
I mean, I think that's a really great point to bring up, because that's exactly like how I feel like is the center of this entire place. You have a person that you call a close friend who attempted to commit suicide, or we think, but all signs kind of point to the fact that he tried to shoot his own brains out, right? But we're so concerned with appearance, with public perception, with the senator's campaign run. We're so concerned with all these even with my character Chris. When Ken was like, I need you to go, and he needs you, he asked for you. She's like, why? And he's like, he needs like a woman. And she's like, why? I'm a man and I don't know how to comfort him, and you're a female. Please go comfort this person who attempted to commit suicide. And even in that piece itself is very telling. And then also you have her kind of like, well, I don't know how to comfort someone who just attempted to commit suicide. But okay, here I go. And, I want to smoke a cigarette and drink vodka and do all these things. And I think that is just kind of very telling of, even in this time, I feel a lot of people aren't aware or knowledgeable in how to be there for someone who is going through something like this. And we're just kind of like, well, do they really need me? Am I like comforting? I don't know. How do I do what I do? It becomes a very awkward situation. But the way that it was written was very funny, because it's very quick, it's very slapstick, it's very like, haha, we're gonna run over this. But there's that underlying tone of like, in the society, we don't know how to deal with this at all, and it's very relatable even till today.
And they even like
100%.
focus on it exactly that, because they all sit down and eat the dinner, and then Ken, who's been deaf this whole time, is like, doesn't anyone want to check on him?
Doesn't anybody care? Yeah.
Like, does anyone care? And even in the beginning, you think as a whole they would like do the right thing and call the doctor, and then they're like, don't tell the doctor.
Or call the police.
Give the person the help they need. Do
not they.
Exactly.
Don't talk about it. Oh, look, pasta. Let's go about it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because at the beginning, they do say they're so worried about how, like, his emotional state, that they decide to cover it up completely with everything else. It is so much easier to cover things up with your own issues or with what's going on, instead of facing the real issues. And that's arguable for every single couple, every single character in this farce, because they all have their issues that they're dealing with internally, but it's completely avoided through this new, through another lie or another some kind of facade to talk about. But I think the real thing comes of this is a possible suicide. We don't ever actually know what happened, but the fact that it was still there, and these people were so worried and caught up with how this was going to make him look, or how he would feel, or how it would make them look, how, like, God forbid, they're involved in a suicide scandal. They put suicide on a scandal level. It really is kind of eye-opening to even like elements of how our society reacts to suicide, to mental illness, to even the real issues in BLM and the Black Lives Matter movement, like, of people just kind of being like, putting up a new front or completely directing the subject away from the focus that it needs to be. And yeah, yeah. And to bounce off of that too, like people using the Black Lives Matter movement or other movements to advertise their own wealth. And I've seen that was another thing I was gonna like bounce off of you, Andre, back whenever. But anyway,
it goes with any movement. You know, you. I thought the funny thing was, there's so much going on in this play that I actually forgot. Like, wait, he was trying to. Was this a suicide? You know what I mean? And I think that tells. That in itself is something. It's like, did you forget? And this whole time that this man, you know, he shot himself, and you're laughing at things like poops and chickens and all the anarchy that goes on in the home, but you do forget, you know. And I think maybe that's the point of the play as well, is like so many things can hit you and so many things can happen in that you don't really focus on what's important. And to bring it back to all of the different movements, and especially political movements, even globally, we never really look at what's happening. You know, you're with the news and the media, different things happening. You're so focused on 100 million things, and no one is just telling you, like, but there's people dying. You know what I mean? Like, there's people losing homes and dying, and that's what we should be focused on. And you get really lost. And I have to admit, even in this play, I was tearing. And just now, until somebody had to remind me, be like, this was a suicide attempt, I have to be like, oh yeah. So that happened. Why didn't I see that happen?
And then also just the fact that we haven't even touched the fact of the help being of Asian descent and the characters not being able to get that right. And as a viewer, you're like, why can't they get that? It's so easy. Like, just learn where they're from. It's so rude. And then the whole thing turned to be that it was a Spanish helper, and he goes to shoot the son because he's strange, because he's Spanish.
very dated.
Like, and then nobody even gets like, oh, haha, that makes sense then. End of play.
Crazy.
What?
Crazy.
It's funny how, like, we're talking about this like it's a period piece, but like the 90s weren't that long ago. It's not like
and it's still happening.
It's happened. It's not like it's ended or happened. Like, it's happening, and it's still happening, and it's a critique on that in a terrible fashion. My God, like, for even if that wasn't the case, for that to just come up into Lenny's mind as an idea is like terrifyingly bad. Like, and that's
believable, and everyone will buy it.
Right.
Yeah, that a police officer would be like,
he did buy it. The police officer bought it.
I'm down.
Not because he believed it.
Well, I like it, so
he
I
liked it.
He liked
I believe it.
Like,
He liked
fuck
it.
you.
Arguably worse.
Cool. Yeah. That's gross.
And that
For
speaks
sure.
that speaks to another thing with just human nature. Like, we rather like something than to believe it. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know if I really like it. But no, it happened.
But it's not even so much and this, speaking as someone of Hispanic descent and having to deal with this kind of stuff, it's not so much even so of like, oh, I like it. It's more of like, this is clean and neat, and I can explain it away and sweep it under the rug, and it's all good, you know, because your lives
go back to my wife.
Right. You know, like, it does, you know, I can sign this report off and I'm good. Like, people are going to believe this. And that also is like really interesting that you bring that up, because it adds another layer to all of this. You know, it's like, so we're making this joke on and on about this like Chinese, Japanese descent, and then we're creating this whole story of, and it's so believable to everybody here because we just really want to explain it away, and it's believable enough for us that we're just gonna sweep it on the rug and it's all good. Let's move on. I want to get home to my wife. Cool.
And also, they're rich, and
Right.
they're rich partying, so
And they
it's
don't think
easier to
about
be
it.
like, well, okay, I
Right.
believe you. It could
Well, and Welch says, "Why do I always have trouble in this town?" And then only goes to leave the first time because the stolen car was found,
Right.
and then someone messes it up. Then they get the next call about the same place. But up until then, they're like, "Oh, so sorry to have disturbed you. Never mind." Ha ha ha. Leaves. That's so different.
And the fact that the story is just so far-fetched is just like, all right, well,
But then that's also like we also have to think about, and think about it. It's like the wealthy class and the police. It's kind of like they kind of go hand in hand and help each other out. It's kind of like, all right, well, we're gonna explain this stuff away, and we're not gonna make any trouble here. Cool, let's move on. Like it's
Girl,
very
it's
easy.
deep real. It's real right now. That relationship.
We're just going in, but it's very exemplary of things that go on today. It's like you got your wealthy class gated community mansions, and something's happening, and I'm a police officer. I'm gonna come over. You can explain something away. It sounds, oh, you gotta, he shot up people in Venezuela. Cool. All right, that makes sense. I'm gone.
The police even said it. He's like, he's like, I'm waiting for this promotion.
Promotion.
So
right,
like this
right.
better be good.
Another layer,
Essentially,
another
which
layer.
is
And we're cool with, like, you're wealthy, and anyone who doesn't look like you isn't necessarily wealthy. And if you can use them as an example to explain away the craziness that's going on, we'll believe it, and we will move on. It's easy, it's neat, tied it up in a bow, and
And cops aren't the only ones that hold rich people to a different standard. We all do. We all take their word over someone else's. We all fall in under who we think they're supposed to be. You think you have a lot of money, and that solves problems, and you wouldn't do some of these crazy things. So
But money
sorry.
doesn't necessarily mean better morale.
It doesn't, but we're used to believing rich people over poor people any day,
Sure, exactly.
Money
Exactly.
talks.
all the
Yeah.
time.
Money talk.
Ethan?
covers up like the even just the constant covering up of one layer or the next. It's the what at the end, what is the story that we come away with? And even at the end of the play, we still don't know the real story. But the story that we are told is, we get this crazy story from Lenny. And that's the only.
Oh, no. It cut out, Ginny, at the end.
That's okay. I said we're left with this crazy story
Right.
when the real meat of the situation was left out completely.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that, like, we get this crazy story, but then it's backed up by, like, Myra's actually in the basement this whole freaking time. So you're like, wait, what? What happened? Is it real? Did it really happen? Wait.